Dr. Gabriel Torres had spent 3 years developing translation protocols for 17 different alien languages, but nothing had prepared him for the moment Ambassador Velthara walked into his linguistics laboratory aboard the Concordia's Dream. The Helix Dominion's representative moved with fluid grace that made human motion seem clumsy by comparison, but it was her bioluminescent scarring that stopped Gabriel's breath entirely. Intricate patterns of living light flowed across her skin like captured starlight, pulsing gently with her heartbeat and shifting color with her emotional state. The scarring covered most of her visible flesh in complex geometric designs that seemed to tell stories in a language of pure luminescence. Her ears, pointed and delicate, curved elegantly along her skull and seemed to track sounds beyond human hearing range. "Dr. Torres," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made his translation equipment struggle to parse the undertones. "I understand you've been working on improved communication protocols between our species." Gabriel realized he was staring and tried to compose himself professionally. "Ambassador Velthara, yes, I've been analyzing the linguistic structures of formal Helix diplomatic language. Your scarring patterns, are they part of your communication system?" The ambassador's bioluminescent markings flickered through what Gabriel's equipment registered as a complex sequence of colors, predominantly shifting toward deeper blues and purples. Her pointed ears flattened slightly against her head. "You find them disturbing," she said, her voice carrying resigned sadness. "I apologize. I know humans prefer unmarked skin. I requested assignment to this mission despite my aesthetic disadvantages." Gabriel blinked in confusion. "Disturbing? No, they're absolutely magnificent. I was trying to understand if the patterns carry linguistic meaning." Velthara's scarring flared brighter, cycling rapidly through colors that made Gabriel's translation matrix emit confused chirps. "You're being polite," she said carefully. "Your cultural briefings were quite clear about human aesthetic preferences regarding bioluminescent scarring." "What briefings?" Gabriel asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because whoever wrote them got it completely wrong. Your scarring is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." The ambassador went very still, her luminous patterns settling into a steady golden glow that seemed to pulse with her breathing. "Dr. Torres, you should not say such things lightly. Among my people, extensive scarring marks one as dangerously sovereign, too independent for traditional bonding." "What does that mean exactly?" Velthara's ears twitched with what appeared to be nervous energy. "The scarring patterns are genetic markers that indicate high levels of personal autonomy and resistance to hierarchical bonding. Most Helix consider such marking undesirable for partnership." Gabriel found himself studying the patterns more intently, noting how they seemed to respond to her emotional state with subtle shifts in intensity and color. "But they're incredible. The way they move, the complexity of the designs, it's like you're wearing living art." "I could never be beautiful for a human," she said with bitter certainty. "Your species associates bioluminescence with alien otherness and scarring with damage." The cultural analysis teams were very thorough in their research. "Then the cultural analysis teams were idiots," Gabriel replied bluntly. "Because I can't stop looking at you, and it's not because I find you disturbing." Velthara's scarring blazed suddenly bright, cycling through a rapid sequence of colors that made Gabriel's eyes water. "Dr. Torres, you should be careful about sustained observation. The scarring patterns are not merely decorative." "What do you mean?" "They're archives," she explained, her voice carrying undertones of growing concern. "Genetic, cultural, and military information encoded in bioluminescent form. The patterns are monitored by palace algorithms designed to detect compatibility." Gabriel felt a chill of premonition. What kind of compatibility? "The kind that triggers oath-bonding protocols when someone demonstrates genuine aesthetic appreciation for sovereign scarring," Velthara said, her patterns now pulsing in what appeared to be alarm. "Dr. Torres, how long have you been unable to look away from me?" Gabriel considered the question and realized with growing unease that he'd been staring at her with fascination since the moment she entered his lab. Pretty much continuously since you arrived. Why? Velthara's luminous patterns settled into a steady, intense glow that seemed to resonate with harmonic frequencies Gabriel could feel in his bones. Because the palace algorithms have been analyzing your ocular fixation patterns and emotional responses for the past 14 minutes. And they've just classified your reaction as aesthetically compatible with sovereign scarring, she said with what sounded like resigned dread, which means they're preparing to initiate first-stage bonding protocols. Gabriel's translation equipment began emitting urgent alerts as new data streams flooded his laboratory's communication array. Information was flowing into his consciousness, tactical analyses, genetic profiles, cultural databases he definitely didn't have clearance to access. This is really happening, he said, watching streams of classified Helix military intelligence scroll across his displays. Your scarring just gave me access to your government's secret files. The oath bond grants shared access to archived information, Velthara confirmed, her patterns now displaying complex sequences that looked suspiciously like star charts and weapon specifications. It's designed to identify individuals whose genetic and aesthetic compatibility makes them suitable for deep cultural integration. Gabriel stared at the flowing patterns of light across her skin, trying to process the implications. So because I think you're beautiful, your scarring has decided I'm marriage material. More that it's decided you're capable of seeing beauty in sovereignty rather than finding it threatening, she corrected. Which, according to ancient protocols, makes you suitable for oath bonding with a scarred individual. And how do you feel about that? Velthara's ears tilted forward, and her scarring shifted to warmer golden tones. I feel like I've spent my entire life being told I was too independent, too marked, too sovereign to be attractive to anyone. And now, a human exolinguist is looking at my scarring like it's the most beautiful thing in the universe. It is the most beautiful thing in the universe, Gabriel said honestly. The way the patterns flow, the complexity of the information encoding, the way they respond to your emotions, it's absolutely mesmerizing. Her scarring flared so brightly that Gabriel's laboratory equipment registered it as a minor photonic event. Dr. Tors, you're making the bonding protocols very enthusiastic. Is that good or bad? That depends, Velthara said, her voice carrying warmth he hadn't heard before, on whether you're prepared for both our governments to consider us a significant political threat. Gabriel looked at the classified information still streaming across his displays and felt a moment of vertigo as the implications hit him. Because I'm a human with access to Helix military secrets. Because we're proof that the aesthetic barriers between our species are artificial, she corrected. And there are factions on both sides who have invested considerable effort in maintaining those barriers. Gabriel's laboratory door chimed with an incoming priority message from the station commander. Through the flowing data streams his enhanced access was providing, he could already see the contents, an urgent request for explanation of the unauthorized information transfer between his laboratory and the Helix diplomatic systems. So, he said, looking at Velthara's luminous scarring as it painted complex patterns of light across his laboratory walls, how much trouble are we in? Her smile was radiant, literally. Her scarring pulsed with warm, golden luminescence that made her entire being seem to glow from within. Dr. Tors, I believe we're about to discover just how beautiful trouble can be. Dr. Gabriel Tors discovered that having unauthorized access to alien military databases was considerably more complicated when those databases were actively updating themselves based on his emotional responses to their owner. Every time he looked at Ambassador Velthara's bioluminescent scarring, new streams of classified information would cascade through his laboratory's systems. The oath bond is still stabilizing, Velthara explained as they worked together on what was ostensibly linguistic research, but had become something more like damage control. The scarring patterns are trying to determine the full extent of your aesthetic compatibility. Gabriel paused in his analysis of helix grammatical structures, as another wave of tactical data flooded his consciousness. Your scarring just downloaded the complete defensive specifications for your home system's orbital platforms. Is that normal? Nothing about this situation is normal, she replied, her luminous patterns shifting to what Gabriel was learning to recognize as wry amusement. Most oath bonds form gradually over months or years of careful courtship. Yours triggered in approximately 14 minutes of sustained aesthetic appreciation. I'm an overachiever, Gabriel said, trying to focus on his work while streams of alien intelligence reports scrolled through his enhanced awareness. Though I have to admit, the more I learn about your culture through this connection, the more fascinating I find your scarring patterns. Velthara's bioluminescence flared brighter, and Gabriel's laboratory equipment registered another data transfer from the Helix diplomatic systems. Gabriel, you need to be careful about feedback loops. The more you appreciate the scarring, the more information it shares. The more information it shares, the deeper your appreciation becomes. That sounds like a problem that could escalate quickly, Gabriel observed, then paused as his enhanced access revealed something troubling in the cultural databases. Velthara, according to these historical records, bioluminescent scarring wasn't always considered undesirable by humans. Her pointed ears perked up with interest. What do you mean? Gabriel highlighted specific data streams through their developing mental link. Early contact reports from the first diplomatic missions show human representatives describing helix scarring as aesthetically fascinating and artistically sophisticated. The negative associations seem to have developed later. Through their connection, Gabriel could feel Velthara's growing alarm as she processed the same information. Someone changed human aesthetic preferences regarding our scarring. And someone changed helix attitudes about sovereign marking, Gabriel added, accessing deeper layers of the cultural archives. Your historical records show that extensive scarring was considered highly desirable until approximately 50 years ago. Velthara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to the deep blues and purples that Gabriel now recognized as her expression of serious concern. Cultural conditioning. Both our species have been programmed to find each other aesthetically incompatible. But why? Gabriel asked, though their shared access to classified databases was already providing disturbing answers. Who benefits from preventing natural attraction between our species? Their investigation was interrupted by Gabriel's communication system, chiming with an urgent message from Station Commander Harris. Dr. Tors, you're requested in Conference Room 7 immediately. Bring the Helix ambassador. This can't be good, Gabriel muttered, saving his research data to encrypted storage. Particularly not when my scarring patterns are broadcasting our emotional states to anyone with bioluminescent sensitivity. Velthara agreed, her patterns pulsing with anxiety that was apparently visible to half the station's alien population. Conference Room 7 contained more high-ranking officials than Gabriel had ever seen in one place, including representatives from both human and Helix military commands. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a plasma torch. Dr. Tors, Commander Harris began without preamble, we've detected unauthorized data transfers between your laboratory and the Helix diplomatic systems. Care to explain? Gabriel glanced at Velthara, whose scarring was currently displaying what appeared to be a complex sequence of tactical readouts. It's related to our linguistic research, Commander. We discovered that helix scarring patterns contain encoded cultural information. Cultural information that includes military defensive specifications. Asked Admiral Chen from Earth Defense Command. The oath bond doesn't distinguish between cultural and tactical data, Velthara explained, her patterns shifting to diplomatic neutrality that nonetheless continued broadcasting classified information. Dr. Tor's aesthetic compatibility with sovereign scarring has triggered deep archive access. War Speaker Kethful of the Helix military leaned forward with obvious displeasure. Ambassador, you were explicitly instructed to avoid triggering bonding protocols with human personnel. I didn't expect human aesthetic appreciation to be this intense, Velthara replied, her ears flattening slightly as her scarring pulsed with what Gabriel was learning to recognize as embarrassment. Gabriel felt compelled to defend her. The ambassador had nothing to do with my reaction to her scarring patterns. I found them beautiful before I knew they contained any information. Found them beautiful, Admiral Chen repeated with obvious skepticism. Dr. Tors, surely you're aware that human aesthetic preferences are fundamentally incompatible with bioluminescent scarring. Are they? Gabriel asked, his enhanced access to Helix databases providing him with interesting contradictory evidence. Because the historical records suggest otherwise. He shared his research through the room's display system, showing the documented changes in both species' aesthetic preferences over the past 50 years. The assembled officials watched in growing unease as the evidence mounted for systematic cultural manipulation. Someone has been conditioning both our species to find each other repulsive, Gabriel concluded, preventing natural attraction that could lead to deeper cooperation. Velthara's scarring blazed brighter as she accessed additional archived data through their bond. The Aesthetic Council and your Cultural Purity Division have been coordinating their efforts, she announced. Both organizations report to the same third-party oversight committee. What third-party oversight committee? Commander Harris demanded. Gabriel felt cold realization wash through their shared connection as classified files revealed the broader conspiracy. One that's been systematically preventing alliance formation between human and Helix populations for decades. The meeting was suddenly interrupted by alarms throughout the station. Through his enhanced awareness, Gabriel could sense ships approaching the neutral platform, vessels with energy signatures that didn't match either human or Helix configurations. Incoming vessels from multiple vectors, announced the station's AI. Unknown configuration. They're demanding immediate surrender of Dr. Tors and Ambassador Velthara. Admiral Chen's expression darkened. Looks like someone doesn't want this information getting out. Gabriel looked at Velthara, whose scarring was now cycling through complex patterns that he realized were defensive protocols activating in response to threat assessment. So what now? Do we surrender and let them silence the evidence, or do we find a way to expose the conspiracy? There is a third option, Velthara said, her luminous patterns settling into configurations that Gabriel's enhanced access identified as formal bonding displays. We complete the oath bond and use the combined archives to broadcast our findings to both our home systems. Complete the oath bond? Gabriel asked, his heart rate accelerating in ways that made Velthara's scarring pulse brighter in response. As in, make this arrangement permanent. As in, she said with a smile that made her entire being glow with warm golden light. Prove that beauty transcends artificial cultural programming, and that aesthetic attraction can be a form of resistance against those who would divide us. Gabriel looked around the conference room at the assembled officials, the approaching enemy fleet, and the streams of classified data that continued flowing through their connection. Well, he said, I can think of worse ways to start a revolution. Dr. Gabriel Tors had always prided himself on being a methodical researcher, but investigating a conspiracy while accidentally falling in love with an alien ambassador whose scarring patterns broadcast classified information was testing the limits of his organizational skills. The data streaming through their oath bond was revealing decades of careful manipulation designed to prevent exactly what was happening between them. The conditioning protocols are sophisticated, Velthara observed as they worked in Gabriel's laboratory, her bioluminescent patterns displaying archived research from both human and Helix psychological warfare divisions. Subliminal messaging in entertainment media, educational materials programmed with aesthetic biases, even atmospheric hormonal adjustments in diplomatic facilities. Gabriel highlighted specific data streams through their mental connection. Look at this timeline. Every major diplomatic breakthrough between our species was followed within months by a cultural campaign emphasizing our fundamental aesthetic incompatibility. And every natural attraction between individuals from our species was systematically discredited as xenological aberration, Velthara added, her pointed ears twitching with indignation as the scarring patterns revealed more evidence. We've been psychologically engineered to find each other repulsive. Except it didn't work on me, Gabriel said, studying the flowing patterns of light across her skin with continued fascination. The conditioning failed completely. I look at your scarring and see nothing but beauty. Velthara's bioluminescence flared brighter, cycling through warm golden tones that made Gabriel's laboratory glow like a sunset. The oath bond suggests that some individuals may be naturally resistant to aesthetic conditioning. Your brain patterns show anomalous responses to standard human beauty triggers. Meaning you might have been immune to the programming from the beginning, she said, her patterns shifting to what Gabriel was learning to recognize as fond amusement, which would make you extremely dangerous to anyone invested in maintaining artificial aesthetic barriers. Their investigation was interrupted by Gabriel's enhanced awareness picking up movement throughout the station. Through the oath bond's access to surveillance systems, he could track individuals taking strategic positions in corridors and maintenance areas. We have company, he announced, his connection to Velthara's scarring allowing him to process security data at inhuman speed. Assassination teams from both species, plus what appears to be a third faction with technology I don't recognize. The Oversight Committee, Velthara realized, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to combat-ready configurations that Gabriel found both terrifying and absolutely mesmerizing. They're cleaning up loose ends before we can expose the full scope of the conditioning program. Gabriel felt the oath bond's defensive protocols activate, flooding his nervous system with enhanced reflexes and tactical awareness. Your scarring just taught me 17 different ways to disable someone with laboratory equipment. That's either very useful or deeply concerning. Both, Velthara confirmed, her patterns now displaying real-time tactical assessments of their situation. The bond prioritizes survival of both partners. It will enhance whatever skills you possess that might be useful for defense. Great. I'm now a combat-capable exolinguist with unauthorized access to alien military secrets and an aesthetic appreciation for bioluminescent scarring that apparently threatens interstellar politics. Gabriel paused as another wave of information flowed through their connection. Also, your scarring patterns just convinced the station's environmental systems that we're in mortal danger, and they're responding by flooding the corridors with emergency containment foam. Velthara's ears perked up with surprise as reports of foam-filled corridors began coming through the station's communication system. The scarring interfaces with compatible technology when under threat. I didn't expect it to commandeer life support systems. Is that going to cause problems? For us? No. For the assassination teams trying to move through corridors filled with hardening foam. Her smile was radiant, literally sending pulses of golden light through her scarring patterns. Considerably more problematic. Gabriel accessed the station's security feeds through their enhanced connection, watching armed figures struggling through corridors that now resembled the inside of expanding foam insulation. Your defense systems have a sense of humor. Survival instincts developed over millions of years of evolution, Velthara corrected, though I admit they sometimes produce entertaining results. Their momentary amusement was interrupted by Gabriel's realization that the foam containment had revealed something unexpected about the assassination teams. Velthara, look at these tactical readings. The third faction isn't using weapons technology from either of our species. Through their shared awareness, she accessed the same sensor data. Those energy signatures, their Vorthan Empire configurations. I thought the Vorthans were extinct. Apparently not, Velthara said grimly, her scarring patterns shifting to display historical archives about humanity's ancient enemies. And if they've been manipulating both our species toward mutual aesthetic revulsion, they've been playing a very long game. Gabriel felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place through their enhanced mental connection. Keep us from forming natural alliances through aesthetic attraction, maintain artificial hostility between potential allies, weaken both civilizations while they rebuild their strength. 60 years of careful psychological manipulation to ensure we remain divided when they return. Velthara agreed. Her bioluminescent patterns now cycling through colors. Gabriel was learning to associate with fierce determination. The environmental foam was beginning to harden throughout the station, trapping most of the assassination teams in place, but Gabriel's enhanced awareness detected movement in the maintenance tunnels that bypassed the life support systems. They're adapting their approach, he observed, tracking energy signatures through service corridors. Multiple teams converging on the central amphitheater, where the formal aesthetic treaty negotiations are scheduled, Velthara realized. They're going to eliminate both diplomatic corps and blame it on aesthetic incompatibility, leading to violence. Gabriel felt the oath bond surge with protective instincts that were becoming difficult to separate from his own growing feelings for the remarkable woman, whose scarring had turned his quiet research career into a galaxy-spanning adventure. Then we'd better get there first and spoil their dramatic finale. Gabriel, Velthara said, her patterns settling into the complex configurations that indicated serious emotional content. If we do this, if we expose the conspiracy and complete the oath bond publicly, there's no going back. You'll be permanently connected to someone your species was programmed to find repulsive. Gabriel looked at the flowing patterns of light across her skin, the elegant curve of her pointed ears, and the intelligence that sparkled in her luminous eyes. Velthara, I've spent the last 3 days looking at you and seeing nothing but beauty. If that's the result of failed programming, then I'm grateful the programming failed. Her scarring blazed with golden radiance that made his entire laboratory glow like captured starlight. Even if it means spending your life with someone considered dangerously sovereign by both our species. Especially because of that, Gabriel replied, finally understanding that his aesthetic appreciation had evolved into something much deeper. After all, what's the point of being immune to cultural conditioning if you don't use that immunity to fall in love with someone absolutely extraordinary? Velthara's laughter was like music made of light, and Gabriel realized that whatever happened next, his quiet career as an exolinguist had been completely, wonderfully, permanently transformed by the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, regardless of what species she happened to be. Dr. Gabriel Torres had attended many academic conferences in his career, but none had ever involved redefining beauty for 2 entire civilizations, while preventing an assassination attempt by extinct alien empires. The central amphitheater of Concordia's dream had been transformed for the formal aesthetic treaty negotiations, with delegates arranged in carefully planned seating that was supposed to minimize visual contact between species, another subtle reinforcement of the artificial barriers they were about to shatter. The oath bond completion requires synchronized aesthetic appreciation, Velthara explained as they prepared for what would either be a diplomatic revolution or a very public catastrophe. When we connect our full consciousness during the ceremony, every witness with bioneural sensitivity will experience beauty as we perceive it. Gabriel felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like a lead blanket. So when I look at your scarring and see the most beautiful thing in the universe, everyone in this amphitheater is going to feel that same aesthetic response. Everyone compatible with the neural broadcast, she confirmed, her bioluminescent patterns cycling through complex preparations that looked like living art, which should be most of both our species, assuming the conditioning can be overridden by direct neural experience. Through their enhanced connection, Gabriel could monitor the approaching Vorthan assassination teams as they moved through the station's maintenance systems. We have approximately 12 minutes before the real diplomats get here, and about 8 minutes before the fake diplomats try to kill everyone. Then we'd better make this ceremony count, Velthara said, her scarring settling into the formal patterns that indicated she was ready to broadcast her consciousness to the assembled witnesses. The diplomatic corps began filing into the amphitheater, representatives from both species taking their assigned positions with the careful precision of people trying not to look directly at each other. Gabriel noticed how many of them made deliberate efforts to avoid eye contact, another sign of the deep conditioning that had kept their civilizations aesthetically segregated. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," announced Commissioner Vale, the human official overseeing the aesthetic treaty negotiations. "We gather today to establish formal protocols regarding visual interaction between our species during diplomatic encounters." Gabriel felt Velthara's amusement flow through their bond at the clinical language, being used to discuss something as fundamental as whether people were allowed to find each other attractive. "Before we begin formal negotiations," Gabriel said, standing from his designated position in the research section, "Ambassador Velthara and I have uncovered evidence that may be relevant to these proceedings." Commissioner Vale frowned at the interruption. "Dr. Torres, you're here as a linguistic consultant. Please remain in your assigned role." "My assigned role," Gabriel replied, "has evolved somewhat beyond translation work." He activated the amphitheater's display systems and began broadcasting the evidence they'd gathered through the oath bond. Historical records, conditioning protocols, evidence of systematic manipulation spanning decades, all flowing through visual displays and direct neural transmission to anyone capable of receiving it. Both our species have been subjected to extensive aesthetic conditioning designed to prevent natural attraction, Gabriel announced as the evidence spread through the assembled delegates' awareness. The supposed incompatibility between humans and Helix beauty standards was artificially created. Velthara stood beside him, her scarring now displaying complex patterns that Gabriel realized were the formal configurations for oath bond completion. The conditioning was implemented by agents working for a third party that benefits from our mutual aesthetic revulsion, the surviving remnants of the Vorthan Empire. The revelation hit the assembly like a thunderbolt. Through his enhanced awareness, Gabriel could sense shock, outrage, and growing understanding rippling through both diplomatic corps as the full scope of the manipulation became clear. "Furthermore," Gabriel continued, feeling the oath bond approaching its completion threshold, "we intend to demonstrate that genuine aesthetic appreciation transcends artificial cultural programming." He turned to face Velthara fully, allowing his unguarded admiration for her bioluminescent scarring to flow through their connection and broadcast to every witness in the amphitheater. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Her patterns blazed with golden radiance that filled the entire space with light, and through the neural broadcast, every person present experienced Gabriel's aesthetic response as if it were their own. For the first time in decades, humans looked at Helix bioluminescent scarring and saw beauty instead of alien otherness. Helix delegates looked at human unmarked skin and found it elegant rather than barren. The artificial aesthetic barriers collapsed in real time as the oath bond's neural broadcast overwrote decades of careful conditioning. "This is what we were supposed to see," whispered Dr. Chen from the human diplomatic staff, staring at Velthara's scarring patterns with wonder. How could we have thought this was anything but magnificent? War Speaker Kethel of the Helix delegation was staring at the human representatives with similar amazement. The symmetry, the structural harmony, human aesthetics possess beauty we were trained to overlook. The ceremony's climactic moment was interrupted by the arrival of the Vorthan assassination teams, but their carefully planned attack was disrupted by the transformation occurring throughout the amphitheater. Instead of aesthetically segregated groups that could be easily manipulated against each other, they found unified delegations working together with the kind of natural cooperation that the conditioning had been designed to prevent. The aesthetic treaty is no longer necessary, Commissioner Vale announced with wonder, watching humans and Helix delegates collaborating effortlessly. Natural aesthetic appreciation has been restored. Gabriel felt the oath bond reach completion as dawn broke on the station's chronometer. The connection between him and Velthara solidified into something permanent and profound, not just romantic love, but a permanent bridge between their species' aesthetic consciousness. So, he said as the Vorthan agents were subdued by the newly cooperative security forces from both species, I think we can officially say that the exolinguistics project was a success. Velthara's laughter filled the amphitheater with cascades of golden light as her scarring pulsed with joy. Dr. Tors, I believe we've just created an entirely new field of study, aesthetic diplomacy through cross-species romantic bonding. The university is going to love that on my research proposals, Gabriel replied, looking around the amphitheater where representatives from two formerly antagonistic species were discovering they found each other beautiful. Though I suspect the paperwork is going to be complicated. Worth it, Velthara said, her bioluminescent patterns settling into configurations that Gabriel now recognized as deep contentment and love. After all, we've just proven that beauty is stronger than decades of psychological warfare. Gabriel looked around the amphitheater at the transformed diplomatic corps, humans and Helix working together with natural ease, their artificial aesthetic barriers dissolved by direct neural experience of genuine attraction. You know, when I started this assignment, I thought I was just going to be translating verb tenses and grammatical structures. Instead, you translated the language of beauty itself, Velthara replied, her scarring pulsing with warm golden light that seemed to encompass everyone present, and discovered that aesthetic appreciation is its own form of universal communication. Commissioner Vale approached them with an expression of wonder still etched on his features. Dr. Tors, Ambassador Velthara, I believe we'll need to completely restructure our diplomatic protocols. The aesthetic treaty negotiations have become obsolete. We'll need cooperation agreements instead. And research partnerships, added Dr. Chen, who was still staring at Velthara's scarring patterns with scientific fascination. The complexity of the information encoding in bioluminescent scarring could revolutionize our understanding of biological data storage. Through their completed oath bond, Gabriel could feel Velthara's amusement at the humans' immediate shift from aesthetic appreciation to scientific curiosity. Some things about your species never change, she sent to him mentally. Says the woman whose people are already calculating the tactical advantages of human Helix aesthetic cooperation. Gabriel replied through their connection, sensing the Helix delegates' similar strategic thinking. War Speaker Kethel joined their growing group with obvious satisfaction. The Vorthan manipulation campaign has been completely exposed. Both our home systems are receiving the neural broadcast data, and the conditioning programs are being systematically dismantled. What happens to the people who implemented the conditioning? Gabriel asked. They face charges for crimes against aesthetic autonomy, Velthara explained, her patterns shifting to display legal codes Gabriel couldn't have imagined existed. Artificially manipulating beauty standards to prevent natural attraction is considered a form of cultural warfare under interstellar law. Gabriel felt a moment of vertigo as he fully grasped the scope of what they'd accomplished. We've just rewritten the definition of beauty for 2 entire civilizations. More than that, Velthara said, her scarring blazing with pride and love that flowed through their bond like liquid starlight. We've proven that genuine aesthetic appreciation can overcome any artificial barrier, that beauty is a form of truth that can't be permanently suppressed, and that love, real love, is ultimately stronger than fear. The celebration was interrupted by an urgent communication from the station's command center. All personnel, we have incoming vessels from both the Human Coalition and the Helix Dominion. Fleet-level response to the neural broadcast data. Through his enhanced awareness, Gabriel could sense the approaching ships, not weapons formations this time, but diplomatic and research vessels carrying officials who wanted to witness firsthand the breakthrough that had just transformed interspecies relations. I think, he said, watching the streams of data that continued flowing through their bond, our quiet research career just became very public. Regrets? Velthara asked, her pointed ears tilted forward with genuine concern. Gabriel looked at her scarring patterns, still the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, now permanently connected to his consciousness through bonds that transcended species boundaries. Around them, representatives from 2 civilizations were discovering they found each other attractive for the first time in decades, their natural aesthetic appreciation restored by the simple act of witnessing genuine love. None whatsoever, he said, meaning it completely, though I do have one question. What's that? When we write the official report on this project, do we classify it under linguistics, aesthetic